Hey, Mary, can you hear?
Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Can you guys all hear me? For those that have, yeah, thumbs up. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Appreciate that. Chat, that's what I want. We're going to give it a couple minutes for people to log on, and Kate was on from Broadreach, but she disappeared, so we'll wait for her to come back and a couple other people to log on. It's working, it's good.
Awesome. Mary, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. I think
okay,
hopefully
great.
Everyone should hear you.
Yeah, perfect. Hey, everyone. I'm so glad that you could join us today. We are really excited to have Mary Dinsmore in the house with us to talk about island ecology, evolution, and endemism. And we are looking forward to hearing what she has to share with us. I hope y'all are having a wonderful and safe, happy 4th of July. And we look forward to going through this. We'll wait just a couple of more minutes before we get started to give a few more people a chance to pop in. And Mary will get started in just a minute or two. And I'll let Mary explain, but I think she's pretty comfortable with having you all ask questions and write questions into the chat box and all kinds of things like that. And we'll get to those as we go along. So we're really glad you're here with us and look forward to hearing what Mary has to say.
Sweet. Just let me know when to start. Okay, Kate?
Will do.
Cool. What's everyone doing for the 4th of July? Anyone want to share? Is anyone doing anything or staying home and being safe? Wearing your mask?
My mom is inviting a friend over, but we're just gonna probably stay home.
It's good, smart. I'm staying home tomorrow. I'm seeing 2 friends tonight outside, socially distanced, of course. Kind of bummed there's no fireworks. Oh my gosh.
Oh no.
I hope your dad's okay. My mom has had it and she was very sick, but she got better. So I hope your dad will be fine. So sorry to hear that. Oh, good. Okay, I'm glad that he's doing well.
All right, Mary, we're probably safe for you to go ahead and get started.
Perfect. Okay. Well, first, thanks so much, everyone, for logging on and joining me today. As Kate from Broadreach was mentioning, my name is Mary, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit just about island ecology and how different elements of evolution influence these things known as endemism. And we'll talk about all of that. A little bit about me. I've been an Broadreach instructor, got my Broadreach swag on for 4 different summers. I recently completed my PhD in conservation biology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I do most of my work in Madagascar, but I've done projects in Peru, Ecuador, and Costa Rica. I'm a big nerd about learning about weird and unique animals and specifically how best we can save them. Little PSA, I am holding an animal in this picture, but I always say, please don't always ever pay to hold wild animals. It usually exacerbates the illegal pet trade and can make endangered species more endangered. So this was part of research, so that animal went right back to the wild. And so just a little PSA warning for you. I already got a question. Carolyn used the chat box, which is awesome. So if you guys want to ever ask me a question, just pull up the chat box. How did you get a PhD? So it's a long journey, very challenging, but not everybody has the capability and capacity to do it. I first went and got a bachelor's degree, and then from there I got a 2-year master's degree, and after that I did my PhD, and it means that you do research on something and then you end up writing a dissertation and publishing that, and then you can become a doctor or a professor at a university or whatever it is that you want to become with your PhD. So if you have more questions about that, I'm happy to answer them later as well. So throw some stuff up in the chat box if necessary. Okay. There we go. Okay, so today I'm just going to talk about 3 main things. The first kind of outline or kind of learning goal of this talk is to learn the major types of islands, understand how evolution and natural selection give rise to unique island ecosystems and species. This is going to get a little nerdy and a little sciencey, but we're all, hopefully it'll be really cool and everyone will learn a little bit. And then I just want to talk about some endemic animals of islands. And if you guys don't even know what endemic means, I'm going to help you learn that term. So we'll learn about what is an endemic island or endemic animal or species and why they're usually found on islands. Okay. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is just there are 6 different types of islands. All right. So we have 6 major different types of islands. The first type is known as continental islands. Okay. So continental islands are islands that were once connected to a continent, okay? And they're usually still part of the continental shelf. So what that means is that they're islands that are usually very close to the mainland or to a continent, and they're connected to the continental shelf because they are, although there's water separating them, the continental shelf underneath that water is still connected to the mainland, okay? So usually these types of islands have very similar ecology to the mainland because they're so close to them and they're still ultimately connected underneath the water. An example of this is there's this, everyone maybe might be familiar with New Zealand. New Zealand is part of something known as Zealandia. It was once connected to major other portions of the world, but the only portion that remains of Zealandia is New Zealand islands themselves. And so they're above water, but all of that other stuff underneath is underwater. Also the Canadian island of Newfoundland, okay, off the east coast of Canada, which you can see in this aerial view of this picture down here. That is a continental island. You can see it's very close to the mainland geographically. The second type of island I want to talk about is something known as a tidal island. Okay, it's a type of continental island where land connecting the island is not completely eroded yet. So there is usually a little strip of land that connects this island to the mainland. However, that area could still be underwater when there's high tide. So that water can come down and then you can see that strip of land, but under high tide, it'll come up and it'll be a true island, okay? There's a famous island in France. You can see that in this little picture right here. It's really small, but you can see this strip of land going through here, okay? And it's called Mont Saint-Michel, Michel, do not speak French, and that is an example of a tidal island. The next type of island is something known as barrier islands. This is our third type of island. Okay. These islands are still near a coast. However, they are geographically distinct and not part of the continental shelf. So there is usually a lagoon or a sound, which are just types of water barriers. Sometimes they can be coral islands, but they don't have to be. And a lot of our barrier islands that we see in the world that we think of right about now was formed during the most recent ice age. An example is the Outer Banks. So all of you who are familiar with Broadreach from North Carolina, the Outer Banks, the islands near there, that's actually some of them in these pictures down here, they're types of barrier islands. They're still very close, but they are technically not part of the continental shelf. Our fourth type of island, these are the ones that you might be the most familiar with because they're going to be what you think of when you think of at least like a tropical island. These are called oceanic islands or volcanic islands. This means that they were never connected to the mainland. Oceanic islands typically have very unique ecologies because they were never connected to the mainlands, and that means that animals and plants have to immigrate to those islands in order to colonize them, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. There are many different ways that oceanic islands can form, usually from different kinds of volcanoes or shifting tectonic plates, and usually it creates this magma that then bubbles up, and the point that you see at the top of the island is ultimately the top of the volcano. And even if the rest of the volcano is way deep down, like within the Earth's core. A lot of the archipelagos, like the Galapagos Islands, they're volcanic islands. Most of the Hawaiian Islands are volcanic islands. Some of these islands that are built from past volcanic eruptions will still have volcanoes on them. Which we know like Hawaii has them and certain Galapagos Islands have volcanoes still on them. Some of you might be familiar with something known as an atoll, which you can see in this bottom right picture. Okay, look at how cool that is, right? You see that just circle strip of land? That's known as an atoll. And it's an island formed from a coral reef that has grown on an eroded and submerged volcanic island. So this is actually kind of like two types of islands combined. It is a coral island, which is the next type of island we're going to talk about, as well as a volcanic island. So this area in the middle is like a submerged island that used to be there that is now just covered with water. I would love to see an atoll someday. Never seen one. Yeah, and if anyone has questions, you can open up that group chat as Kate was just mentioning and ask away. I'm happy to interrupt me whenever. We then have something known as a coral island, okay? And these are also might be what you're really familiar with, especially in terms of tropical islands. If anyone went to the Broadreach at Home Talk two times ago, they talked a lot about coral reefs, or she talked a lot about coral reefs. And islands are found within the tropics, and they're made from coral, and then they're calcium carbonate skeleton, which can create limestone, okay? There's other organic and inorganic material like rock and sand that help create coral islands. These constitute things like the Bahamas, a lot of the islands in the Atlantic Ocean and throughout the Caribbean Sea are also coral islands. And we'll talk a little bit about the Caribbean and its animals later on. And again, an atoll, the ones we were just talking about, those really beautiful circular ones, are coral formed around one of the other kinds, what we were saying, the volcanic islands. And last but not least, there's one more type of island, and they are artificial islands. So these are all man-made islands. How they actually do this, I am not an environmental engineer, so I can't say exactly how they create these things, but they're fascinating and they're almost ornate and usually decorated. Like this is in Dubai, the very famous palm tree island in Dubai. They basically brought in land and in the shallow areas of the waters there and created an island that people can go on and looks like live on. And but specifically how they do it, man, I don't know, but it's pretty rad. I know they take a lot of sand. Wow, that's really interesting. I'm sure they would take a lot of sand and they have to bring that all in. Thanks, Kelsey. So kind of what I want to get, which makes it expensive. Why are animals so unique on islands, okay? And so I want to talk about this mostly in terms of evolution, okay? So animals that are found on islands are usually typically unique and really rare on islands, and this is due to evolution, okay? So this picture I wanted to bring up because we've all heard, at least maybe some of you might know of evolution, or biological evolution, but we use the term evolution in our everyday life, right? We always say, oh, he's gone through an evolution, and it usually just means change over time. This is the everyday usage, right? So this article titled "The Mesmerizing Evolution of Brad Pitt's Hair," okay? He's just saying that his hair is changing over time and it's evolving to be different looks, okay? But that is not the same. It is not synonymous with biological evolution, okay? The most basic definition of what is biological evolution, it has 4 characteristics. It's a change in the heritable characteristics, so in your genome, your genetics, within a population, and it takes a lot of time, over many generations, okay? So the big difference with this is that biological evolution has to happen at the population level, right? Evolution cannot happen to an individual. So while in our everyday language, we might say that evolution, Brad Pitt's hair is evolving, that is not how we use biological evolution. It has to happen at the population level, right? A big group of animals or a big group of humans, or we are animals, but a big group of species, okay? And it takes many generations for it to happen. There are several types of evolution, okay, or mechanisms by which evolution can occur. There's something known as genetic drift. There's something known as the bottleneck effect. Something known as sexual selection, or mate choice, right? Animals can choose if they want to mate with a certain individual or not based on how they look or different characteristics, right? Like birds, right? Female birds love males with all the colors on them, right? That's called sexual selection. Random mating just means that you can mate with whoever you want. It's just random, right? And so those are transfers of genes back and forth, okay? There's also something known as horizontal gene transfer. This usually happens with bacteria. It's very complicated. It's not super important for this talk. The one that's the most important that I want to talk about, and the one that you probably, if you ever study any aspects of biology that you will talk about the most, is something known as natural selection. Okay, maybe you've even heard of it, right? This is what Darwin talks about a lot, is this process of natural selection. I want to talk a little bit about natural selection, and this is all going to have a point, right? All about islands. We're going to circle back. natural selection, and I'm going to use this acronym, okay, known as VISTA. So how natural selection happens, I'm going to use this acronym. It starts out with V, right? And the V stands for variation. So you have a big population of animals in an area, right? And it starts out by one individual having a random mutation in their body that makes them have a certain trait, okay? So you have, our bodies mutate all the time. Our genes mutate, our cells mutate, and that mutation can create something different within our bodies. But sometimes your mutations happen in a cell that doesn't, you know, in your fingernail, but it doesn't mean anything for your future generations. It must be an inheritable gene. So it just means so that you can pass it from one generation to the next. So in a population, we have an individual that has a random mutation, okay? They're just a mutant. That mutation must be inheritable. They must be able to pass that mutation down to the next generation. Then once that gene that we have is selected for, or sorry, is inherited, it must be selected for. It means that there's some environmental pressure in the environment that favors certain traits, okay? So it means that, like, if I had a random mutation that's gonna make me run really fast, that would be selected for in an environment that's gonna make me outrun a predator. This is what it means when Darwin says that they are the fittest animals, survival of the fittest. It means that they are the ones most likely to survive and pass on their genes. This happens over time, okay? So this cannot happen in one generation to the next. It has to happen over many generations in order for it to be completely selected for, right? And then eventually these populations become adapted to their environment. It means that they're more likely to survive because the trait, the gene, that was once just one random mutation has become prevalent in so many individuals within the population that that population is more adapted to their environment. Okay. So that's a little crash course on natural selection. And you might be asking yourself, why is she talking about this when we're talking just about islands? Okay. It has to do with this fact that it works at the population level, right? If you think about populations, somebody in the chat box, are populations of animals going to be larger sized or smaller sized on islands? I saw Carolyn mouthing the word smaller.
Smaller, sorry, I forgot.
No, it's great. Smaller, okay, I had one for bigger. It's another for smaller, smaller. It is about being smaller, right? So islands are smaller environments, so they're gonna house smaller populations. If you have a smaller population, do you think that natural selection and genes can become more prevalent more quickly or slower? So if you have a smaller population, can new genes become more prevalent in the population faster, quicker, quicker? Exactly, right? So natural selection can happen quicker on islands. The process of evolution can happen quicker on islands, so it takes shorter time on islands than it does everywhere else in the world, which means that we can have weirder and wilder and more adapted animals on island environments than anywhere else in the world, okay? And so an example of this is this biologist known as Jonathan Weiner, and this book, I can't recommend it enough. It's a little dense, but it was a Pulitzer Prize winning book. It's called The Beak of the Finch. It is really rare for us to see our Galapagos tortoise as an anomaly. I'll get to that in a sec. We'll talk about the Galapagos in a hot second, and I'll come back to that. This book is all about how they were able, because they were studying these birds on an island environment in the Galapagos, these Galapagos finches, they were able to track and see actual evolutionary changes happening within a course of like a couple decades, which is really fast, especially for larger bodied animals. We can think about things like bacteria. Bacteria reproduce so quickly, they can become resistant to antibiotics very, very quickly because they reproduce really quickly, and they can have these random mutations that end up being beneficial for them to be resistant to antibiotics, okay? And so they become really prominent within a population more quickly on island environments because those islands are smaller and because the populations are smaller. Cool. So we've knocked out one of the main. Cool. Wait, did somebody have a question? Okay. I'm going to talk about one other major principle that influences animals on islands. And this is a major like biological principle known as island biogeography theory. This was championed by two biologists known as E.O. Wilson and Robert MacArthur. Robert MacArthur did pass away in the late 70s, but E.O. Wilson, he's a professor emeritus at Harvard. He is an entomologist, so he studies insects, and he is wildly famous in the biological world. And this theory that these two men created has three main principles, okay? And I'm gonna go through these one at a time after this, and then we're gonna get into some cool father of biodiversity. Absolutely, he wrote a book known as Half Earth. He believes that we as humans need to set aside half of the Earth's land in order to protect it, which is a radical, that's a very intense idea. It would be great if we could do it, but very highly impractical. Impractical. I can't speak. Anyways, so E.O. Wilson and Robert MacArthur, island biogeography theory, three main principles. They stated that as the number of species on an island increases, immigration and extinctions on that island decrease, okay? Because if a new animal comes to an island where there's already a lot of biodiversity there, a lot of number of species there, it's most likely that they already are present on the island, right? So that would not be a new immigration of a different species. They also stated that as an area, the size of an island increases, the number of species is also going to increase, right? Because you have more land for them to be on. It also is saying that the probability of extinctions will decrease, right? If the island is bigger, it can house, there's less competition among species on that island. They also had one other principle. As distance from the mainland increases, so how far away it is from the mainland, number of species will decrease and the probability of extinctions is going to increase. And I'm going to go through all of this in a little bit further in a couple more slides, and then we'll talk about some cool animals. So rates of extinction and immigration together determine the number of species on an island at equilibrium. So however much the species are going extinct and other ones that are immigrating is going to actually determine how many species are going to be on that island. This is kind of, it looks kind of crazy, but if I break it down, you should be able to, I think it all makes sense. It's represented, all those principles are represented on this thing known as a species area curve. So on the blue, right, we have something known as the rate of immigration, okay? And so as the number of species increase, the rate of immigration is going to decrease. It's going to go down, okay? Because as you have, you know, as I already kind of was mentioning, as species arrive to an island, most likely, or as individuals arrive, they're most likely to already be present on that island. On the green, we have as number of species increase, the rate of extinction is also going to increase, right? Because there's more competition about different species with limited resources on an island. It means that there's going to be just more things to go extinct and there's more competition. Where these lines cross is where the estimation of how many number of species are actually going to be found on that island. But is this graph representative of all islands? The answer is no, right? Not all islands are created equal, okay? And I'm just going to talk about one more principle before we go on. And this has to do with the second and third principles that I mentioned on the other slide. Equilibrium varies determinative of the size of an island and the distance of that island from the mainland. Okay, so if this is an island and this is the mainland right here, okay, if you had an island right here that was pretty close to the mainland, would you think that there would be more species of diversity found on that island or less? What would you all think, more or less? hear from you. Got to vote for less, more, okay? More. It's that there's more. There's going to be more different species on this island if it's close to the mainland than if it's farther away. Because if it's an island over here, it's going to be, just to clarify, good, okay, good question. So as number of species increases, immigration and extinctions increase or decrease. Immigration, as number of species increases, immigration will decrease, right? Because the likelihood that they're already going to be on that island is higher. More individuals, not species, right? That's a good clarification, right? So there will be more individuals on that island, but the likelihood that they're going to be a different species, that's what's going to change. Does that make sense? Cool, okay. So islands that are closer to the mainland are gonna, the theory is that there's gonna be more species there than an island farther away. It's just easier for animals to get to an island that's closer than it is for them to get to something far away. Of course, things like birds, it's gonna be easy, you know, the likelihood that they can get here, totally acceptable. But things like mammals and insects and other things, it's much harder. Size is also an issue, right? So animals found on an island that's small, they're more likely to go extinct than on an island that is really, really large, right? This just has to do with competition, okay? So the likelihood that they will live on this island is much higher when there's less competition. This gets a little complicated. You know, I'm not trying to confuse you or anything, but we can add both of those elements about it being close to the mainland and larger or smaller islands based on onto that species area, that same species area to curve, okay? So we still have rate of immigration on the left, but now we've added if an island is close or far from the mainland, okay? So things that are far away are going to have less number of species than islands that are close to the mainland, right? So the number of species is increasing about the bottom, right? So you have 0 over here and you have 1,000 or something over here. If it's close to the mainland, you're going to have more species than if it's far away. But then it also has to do with the rate of extinction. Is that because it's harder for species to get there? Exactly, you're nailing it, right? Good question, Grace. So it's because it's harder for species to get there. We then have something known, then we then have to also talk about the rate of extinction in tandem with the rate of immigration. Okay, so how many are coming there? We've talked about that, it's being close or far, versus the rate of extinction is based on the size of the island. Smaller islands are going to have a higher rate of extinction than larger islands, right? Less competition of species, resources for different species on larger islands than those on smaller islands. So as you can see here, the crossing point between an island that is close to the mainland, that is very large, will be able to house the most number of species, versus an island that is far from the mainland, if we're looking right here, that is a small island far from the mainland, it is hypothesized that they are going to have the smallest or fewest number of species. Okay. There are many other elements that will go into this. I'm talking about island ecology, right? It can have to do with things with species interactions, evolution, and competition. And what this ultimately results in is something known as endemism, okay? Has anyone ever heard of an endemic animal before? No? Cool. So an endemic animal, it means that it is only found in one place, okay? There are endemic animals all over the world, right? Like giant panda bears are only found in China. I'm going to talk a little bit about Madagascar, and these lemurs are only found in Madagascar. Or there's many animals that are only found in the Galapagos Islands, okay? Because things on islands are so isolated, it results in many of those species found there being endemic. It means that they're found nowhere else on the world. So they're really rare species that are found only in one place. The problem with this is that when animals are become endemic, it means that they usually have smaller populations, which ultimately means that they're going to have an increased likelihood of extinction, right? Because remember, smaller populations on islands. And so if they're only found in that one place, it's likely that they could be an endangered species as a result. So before I talk about just some cool animals found on islands for the last 10 or 15 minutes, I just want to see if anyone has any questions. IBT is, okay, let me go back. Sorry, IBT is just an acronym for this theory. This entire theory is known as Island Biogeography Theory, see here in red. And so it's IBT, Island Biogeography Theory. Good question. Sorry, I didn't clarify that. What is endemic? I didn't get that. Totally. Endemic is a species that is only found on one place. So it means that it's not found in multiple countries or multiple habitats. It's only found in like one country or one island. So many different species that are on islands are only found on those islands. Like Java, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, any other questions before we go on? Good? Okay. So now I want to just talk about a couple cool endemic animals that are found only on islands, right? So now we have these principles of, you know, that evolution works quicker on islands, and you've got this theory of island biogeography theory, right? So we've got this ecology going on in our heads, and so now let's meet some of the crazy animals. And this is one of my favorite quotes. Darwin is a genius, and I just think this is so beautiful, especially to end here. It says, "From so simple a beginning, endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful, have been and are being evolved." And that results in really cool endemic animals. And so I'm going to quickly go through some about Madagascar. I'll go over a couple of the Galapagos and maybe touch on some of the Caribbean before we wrap this up. So Madagascar, it's where I work. It is the 4th largest island in the world. And as you can see here, it's an island that is found off the coast of Africa. Okay. And it's crazy because it has really different geography throughout the island. There are rainforests, there are coastal areas, there are these cool rock formations that are 150 million year old limestone, okay? And that's called the Singi. It's only found in Madagascar. So Madagascar is incredibly unique because it has a high rate of endemic meaning only found in that place, of animals and plants. 80% of all species found in Madagascar are found nowhere else in the world. And because of this, it is one of the world's 25 biodiversity hotspots, which means that it is a priority that we need to save these things found on this island because they're found nowhere else. So animals got to Madagascar, about like lemurs, okay, 65 million years ago. And how they got there is that they floated over on a raft of giant land coming from mainland Africa, okay? And when they landed in Madagascar, there weren't a lot of predators or competition. There were no humans. Humans are really new to Madagascar. Humans only arrived about 2,000 years ago. And so the animals and plants that are found in Madagascar ended up becoming really unique because they were able to evolve specifically to the ecosystems there. And so now there are 110 different species of lemur found on the islands of Madagascar. And lemurs are endemic, meaning they're found nowhere else. So there's all these crazy and amazing types of lemurs, okay? The first I want to tell you about really quickly is this Indri. It is the largest living lemur. They have kind of these nub tails. They look like little teddy bears, like with these tails. They're really big. They're like about the size of a half of a human. And they live in family groups. And what's really cool about them is that they have these really bizarre vocalizations. So let me know if you can hear. I think I did this, that you can hear my audio. You guys hear this? What they do is they do this in the morning, and it's a territorial thing because they live within their family groups, and what they're doing is they're calling to other groups of Indri, and they're saying, this is my home, don't come into my home, okay? And so it's a territorial thing. It's so cool. I love Indri. They're phenomenal. It's amazing to wake up in the morning and they're making that sound at like 6 a.m. It's a great sound to wake up to. The other ones I want to talk about are Chafaka lemurs. So there are a lot of different species of Chafaks. They're pretty large in size. And what's so cool about them is that they dance, because what happens is that they are meant to live in the trees, but when they come to the ground, they are unable to run on all fours because their arms are so much shorter than their legs. So they hop like humans. And I'm going to show you a video of them doing this. And it looks like they're kind of dancing. So they're like these weird bipedal primates. Yes, Zaboomafoo. If anyone is familiar with Zaboomafoo, it's a show that used to be on PBS. They are a type of Chafak lemur. So you can see, look how big their feet are, and that's for them to grip in the trees. Pretty cool. One of the other ones I'm going to quickly talk about is the eye. This is one of the weirdest and craziest animals in Madagascar. This is a primate, so it's related to you and I, okay? And they are, what's crazy about them is that they have continuously growing incisors, so like a rodent. They thought that they were rodents when they first discovered them. And what's even crazier is that they have these big bat-like ears, and their middle finger is skeletal and elongated. They are the only primate in the world that has claws instead of nails. One of the defining characteristics that makes a primate is that we have nails and not claws, but this primate has claws. And so what it does is it goes around, it filled the ecological niche of a woodpecker. And so what it does is it goes around to trees and it taps on the trees and the bamboo, and it uses those really big ears to listen for things that are living inside of it, like insects. And so I'm going to show you a quick video of them doing this. This is an eye. They are nocturnal, so they're awake at night. And see it tapping? And then they scratch in with that elongated finger. In Madagascar, they're known as spirits because they think that they might be like ancestors. And this is actually one of the bad spirits, which is detrimental because sometimes humans think they're scary and they end up wanting to kill them instead of, taking care of them because they're a bad omen within Madagascar. But they are one of the craziest animals found in Madagascar. They're super cool. The last lemur I want to talk about is this black lemur. And what's kind of crazy about them is that they are sexually dichromatic. It means that this is the same species, but this is on the bottom is the female and the top is the male. So males and females are different colors. So I'm gonna show you a quick video and then I'm gonna move on and then we'll wrap up here in like a couple, 3 or 4 minutes. So what they do is they use millipedes as insecticide. So he's grabbing that giant African millipede and he's rubbing it all over its body in order to not get bitten by insects. And what happens is that there is actually kind of a toxin that kind of makes them drunk. So these lemurs end up getting a little zonked out when they do this. And you can see he's going to start kind of drooling here in a second as a byproduct. Anyways, beyond that, there are some other crazy animals found throughout Madagascar. All of these right here that you see on this screen are endemic animals to Madagascar. This is a giant flying fox. It's huge bat. There's this fossa that's really large. That's the only carnivore within all of Madagascar. This is something known as the giraffe-necked weevil, which is an insect that gets its name because of its really long and crazy neck. This is the golden ordweeb spider. And someone once collected enough of its golden silk and created the most expensive garment in the world. This is like millions of dollars because it took so many insects in order to pull their silk thread out. And then one of the others makes the largest spider web in the world. It can cross rivers and it's so large. Other islands, I'm just going to breeze through this really quickly just to finish up. There's many other islands that have many different crazy animals like the Galapagos. Boobies are types of birds that are only found, where they're found mostly in the Galapagos. They are found in one other small place. But blue-footed boobies and red-footed boobies, they get their crazy colorful feet from the different things that they eat. That's weird. I don't know why it's doing that. Okay, well, this didn't, I'm having a little technical issue here. I guess we are kind of almost out of time. I was going to go through and talk about a few other in the Galapagos, but I don't know what's going on with my, what do they eat to get different colored feet? It is a type of fish the blue-footed boobies get from, it's something in the fish's skin that gives them that blue color. Exactly what it is, it's some type of like keratin or protein that allows them to get these different colored feet. I don't know exactly. It's kind of like when flamingos, they eat different, they eat krill, and flamingos actually only turn pink when they eat enough krill to turn pink. They're actually more of a white color by nature. Sorry about that not downloading all the way. Any other questions? It's only also, Well, sorry about this. I guess it is, I'll probably end here. I had a whole bunch of other slides. I don't know what to do. I don't know why it didn't download all the way.
Well, that's okay, Mary.
Questions about your work. Can I email you? Yeah, of course. Yeah, sorry, Kate.
Yeah. Oh, you're good. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, great. I think, I mean, I'll speak for myself, but I think we'll definitely want to have Mary back to do an entire lecture or lesson on lemurs. So if y'all are excited about that or anything else that you heard Mary talking about, you can throw it in the chat and we can invite her back to keep going on some of this stuff. So we really appreciate that. And thank the rest of you so much for coming. Don't forget that the newsletter that went out on Monday has a bunch of resources for diving a little bit deeper into some of the topics that you learned about, some fun things to do with people in your household. Take some pictures of anything that you do from that newsletter and share it with us on social media. Maybe we'll feature you on our social media. We really want to follow along with what you're up to this summer. And don't forget to register for next week's talks. They're all going to be about sharks, I believe.
I had a little thing about them too, about the sharks, but I don't know what happened to my PowerPoint here. Little technical glitch.
No worries. Yeah. And so, yeah, we'll definitely, and I think you got one more question there, Mary, if I saw.
What about the Galapagos tortoise? You said you were going to talk about that later. Yeah, I had a little thing on that. I don't know what happened to my PowerPoint. They are endemic, and they are to the Galapagos Islands, and there's a whole bunch of different species of them. What can I say about them? Fascinating. They're some of the oldest living animals in the world. They can get up to about like 140 years old. They are found only there. There are other giant tortoises in like Papua New Guinea. So there are some very similar type of species to the Galapagos tortoises, but the Galapagos tortoises are endemic only to those islands. If anyone is interested, Broadreach does have an awesome, I had a little pitch there too. They have an awesome trip to the Galapagos. I led that trip, and it is, can we get the PowerPoint with the slides we didn't see? Yes, I will happily give it to everyone. I'll figure out a way to do that. There's just some more endemic animals that I was going to share with you. Also in the Caribbean, Broadreach does a lot. There's a lot of endemic animals there. Cool trips, both Broadreach does to those. I've led the Galapagos trip. Ace, awesome. One of my favorite places in the world. Besides Madagascar, it's the Galapagos. Highly recommend. And if anyone wants to ever email me, I can give you guys my email. I'll send it here. Happy to answer any of your questions. There you go. Oh no, that was only just one person. Sorry. I appreciate you all coming today. Sorry that it got shut off. I'll try to email Kate the whole PowerPoint so that maybe they can put it up somewhere so that people can see it.
Yeah, we can send it out to all of you. And thank you so much for being here, Mary. If you all have any other questions, please feel free to ask them now. We'll wait a couple more minutes and then we'll end the Zoom.
Yeah, and if there's any other questions, just shoot them my way. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for saying thank you.
I really do, Mary, want you to come back and do a whole lesson on lemurs.
I can do it.
All right.
I mean, I love them. You know, one day you should do an island of Madagascar tour for Broadreach, pitching.
Yeah.
What is one of your favorite animals to work with? Ooh, I mean, I'm a trained primatologist, which means I work with primates mostly. One of my favorite animals to always see are spider monkeys. I love them. They are found in Central and South America. You will see them if you go on the Broadreach Ecuador trip, that you go to the Amazon, and they just crash through the trees, and they kind of like whoop, 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 is like how they talk, and they do this thing called brachiation. You saw them in Costa Rica. I mean, they're amazing, right? And so they swing arm over arm movement, and that's called brachiating, and they're like little acrobats of the trees. Other things, I mean, I'm partial to lemurs just because I spent so much time there. My heart is in, part of my heart is in Madagascar. I've spent like 2 years of my life there. So I love them dearly. But yeah, thanks for asking that question.
Amazing. We'll are you multilingual?
I'm multilingual. Kind of, I can speak a little bit of Malagasy. So when I chose to go to Madagascar, I chose to, they also speak French. They were colonized by France. And so a lot of the people there will speak French, but French is not my language. French is not their language. And so I chose to try to learn as much Malagasy as possible. So Mahameteni Malagasy Ahu Keli Keli, which means that I can speak a little bit of Malagasy. I tried to learn as much as I could. Most of the words I learned were like, where is the lemur? I cannot see it. Is it behind the tree? Just because that helped me with my work the most. But I knew enough to get around.
That's awesome. Well, you all don't forget to sign up for next week. The link is in the newsletter that you got. So check that out, and we'll see you all next week. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, everybody. Happy 4th of July.
Thank you, Mary.